Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next in our webinar series at connectedlearning.tv. This morning, we're really delighted to have as our guest Michael Car sorry, Karnjanaprakorn. I should have been able to do that better. I was coached. And Michael is CEO and co-founder of Skillshare.com. It's a marketplace for people to teach stuff and learn stuff from each other. And it's really been exciting to see the community there grow and scale to different cities in the past year or two. Michael comes to Skillshare with a rich background in developing platforms and doing work in organizing communities. He is a TED Fellow, a graduate of the University of Virginia and VCU Brand Center, part of the product team at Hot Potato, which was acquired by Facebook before he started Skillshare. And so we're really excited to have, as a part of our series, people who are doing work like Michael in the platform and technology and community development side online. And we're really also excited to be joined today by some great folks in the Hangout. And before we turn it over to Michael, I'd like to let each of our Hangout participants introduce themselves. So James, do you want to kick us off here?
Oh, sure. My name is James Lopez. I'm from New York City, and I'm at the Hangout now because I was actually inspired by Skillshare to apply the same concept, but more for kindergarten to fifth grade. Mike was doing something with littleBits at South by Southwest, and I thought that this was the perfect way for kids to actually learn and be engaged, but I wanted to take it a step further and actually include the parents and apply that to K to fifth grade. So I'm a technologist based out of New York City. That's about it. Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, James. Luca, do you want to jump in?
Sure. My name is Luca. I'm a sociology PhD candidate at Boston College. I am part of the Connected Consumption team advised by Juliet Shore, which is part of the Connected Learning Research Network. My interests are in education and organizations, and I am currently studying open education, which Skillshare definitely falls into.
Great, thanks, Luca. Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Kurt. I'm from the University of Nevada, Reno in Reno, Nevada. And I'm the Emerging Technologies librarian here. And I'm interested not only in emerging technologies, but connected learning. I'm really interested to see the kinds of things coming out of Skillshare. I know libraries are doing the same kind of work, bringing together people, community, and yeah, so I'd like to explore a bit more of that and identify experts in local areas and connect those with the community.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Stephen.
Yes, my name is Stephen Harowitz. I'm at the University of South Carolina, where I advise student event planners on campus. I just graduated with my master's in higher education and student affairs. I work on hands-on with students, teaching them transferable skills, marketing, website design, event planning, all over the board. My background was interdisciplinary studies. That was my bachelor's. So I'm all about mashing up education, looking at it and seeing what we can add to the pot to make people think a little bit differently. So I'm kind of in the trenches with students, working with them hands-on and helping them learn and engage in the world around them.
Excellent. Thanks, Stephen. Now, as is usual with our format, we'll have Michael talk for about 10 minutes, and I would encourage those of you following the session on live stream to pose questions on chat, which I will do my best to moderate and bring into the Hangout discussion here. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Michael.
All right, thank you. Let's see if this is working. Yeah, so probably for the next 6 to 10 minutes, I'll just kind of give a quick overview in Skillshare and kind of where we've been, where we're going, and our general thoughts about the overall education system and learning in general. So Skillshare is a community marketplace that allows anyone in communities to teach or share any skills they have to other people. So for example, if you wanted to teach a class on programming or how to start a restaurant or bike repair, you can teach a class to someone else in your city. So the way it works is you would pick a location, a date, time, and you put together a curriculum, and then other people in the community would go buy those tickets. So in a very simple explanation, that's how Skillshare works. In the context of education, which is what I'm assuming we'll talk about today, specifically online, we have a lot of theories and beliefs on what drives Skillshare and what drives us to what we do and where we can go. So I'll really quickly spend the next 5 minutes and give an overview, which should hopefully drive the discussion for the next 45 minutes. So when we talk about education here at Skillshare, and we've given a lot of talks on this, we say the biggest problem with the education system today is that it's no longer about learning. And what we mean by that is we believe that education is very top-down driven, and it's very centralized around going to school and going to college and getting a degree. And we believe there's nothing wrong with that, and we'll always need a traditional education system in society. But what we stand for is learning, and we feel that learning is very bottom-up. Learning is very student-driven. It's fueled by your passions, what you're actually interested in learning about. It could lead you to getting a job. It could lead you to find new hobbies. It could lead you to finding new things that you're interested about that you would have never known about. And the quote we always give is, we believe that every single person on this planet is born with curiosity because curiosity is the compass that leads you to your individual passions. So that's kind of like the fundamental belief that drives what we do every day. And not too long ago, we put together kind of what we believe is the Skillshare way of education. So the idea is about a month ago, we put together a conference called Penny. And the idea behind Penny was, we curated and had a lot of different speakers speak. But the basic idea is if you could blow up education and start over and build it from scratch, what would it look like? How would the internet come into play? How do communities come into play? And we started, putting together this model that we're building towards. So the first one we said was that education is what someone tells you to do, while learning is what you do for yourself. And our mission at Skillshare is to reunite learning back with education and make it accessible to every single person on this planet. So anyone can learn anything at any age at an affordable cost, anywhere in the world. And when you reunite learning, a lot of great things start happening. One is, we talk a lot about learning by doing. So rather than memorizing things for tests, people on Skillshare and hopefully, in other communities, outside of our company, will learn by taking action. They'll learn from their peers. They'll learn by getting feedback. They'll learn in a group. They'll learn by making mistakes. They'll learn by making things. They'll learn by failing. And we believe, that's a great way to really apply tomorrow. The other belief that drives a lot of what we're doing is that we believe that everyone is a teacher. And the old model of education, the traditional model of education is, an expert stands in front of a classroom and lectures and really passes his knowledge from one person to another. But with the internet today, a lot of that knowledge is already pretty free on the internet. So we really have been experimenting in New York with a lot of our teachers and applying the Salman Khan model, or the Khan Academy model of teaching, where you don't have to be an expert. You can learn from your peers, you can learn from a teacher. But the basic idea is to send all the work and the coursework before the class and spend a lot of the class time making things or building things or workshopping or creating. And that's kind of the mantra and I guess the manifesto that we're living by right now. The other thing we really believe is that learning can happen anywhere. So going back to what I said earlier, that most people believe that classes happen in classrooms. One of my favorite examples of a class that happened in the past year is a girl taught a class on how to talk to strangers. And rather than having it in a classroom where she would have given a lecture and handed out a bunch of handouts, she went and bought about a dozen balloons, had everyone meet her at the park. And she gave them a really quick 5 to 10 minute lesson, and gave them a couple key points that they had to really, or a couple concepts they really had to embrace. And the next thing she did is she took them onto the subway, and the class ended when each one of those students handed a balloon to someone and had a conversation with a stranger. Which just shows you that people can get really creative in the ways they teach, and people can get really creative in the ways they want to learn. And for Skillshare, we look at it as very similar to Kickstarter. I think similar as far as the projects, but as far as getting really, really creative in how people can teach and share skills. And lastly, we really believe in learning with communities. We believe that there's a lot of different ways you can learn. You can learn by yourself, which is going to Wikipedia or watching some YouTube videos. You can learn from a teacher, which is the way most people learn, and then you can learn from other people. And I think we're starting to see that happen a lot through the internet. Is that if I'm working on a project, I could ask another student for feedback or get their advice on how I should attack this, or get some feedback on what I'm working on. And we're seeing that loop happen where students are becoming actually the best teachers, and hopefully we could break down those barriers as well. So that's pretty a quick overview of Skillshare and kind of our beliefs and what we're building towards, and I would love to just spend the next 40 to 45 minutes kind of digging deep into any of those concepts, or answering any other questions that people have.
Thanks, Michael. That was a great overview. I remember when I found out about Skillshare, it was just so exciting to see, a lot of the learning principles and beliefs and philosophies that we've been pursuing in the connected learning or the digital media and learning work instantiated in an actual sort of platform and startup. So it's just really cool to see how you've been kind of running with those ideas and making them a reality in the ground and the platform layer. So yeah, I wanted to invite our participants in the Hangout to jump in. Luca, did you have a question you wanted to pose to Michael?
Sure. Michael, I love the model. I think you're absolutely right when you said education is no longer about learning. And so a question I have for you, and this is my view as a sociologist, do you see Skillshare's model, is that something that you want to institutionalize, to, kind of bring to the education system and diffuse across the education system, or is Skillshare more about de-institutionalizing education, kind of taking what's broken and, I guess, breaking it down?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot, and I think there's a lot of things broken with the education system, but I don't think anything we're doing at Skillshare is meant to replace it. I mean, if anything, it's supposed to be, and hopefully will be, very complementary. The original reason we started Skillshare is because, Malcolm is the co-founder, and we talked to, actually the original idea behind Skillshare was to build a school for kids. We wanted to create an innovation school for kids, specifically for those through K through 12, but also for those that were graduating and didn't want to go to college. The reason we didn't do that is because we felt we had so much experience building things on the internet and building things at scale. We decided to go down that route instead. But I think the original idea behind Skillshare and the drive that drove us to start it still holds true today. Is build something very complementary for the people that do not fit into the traditional model or want something complementary. Hopefully, what would happen is we can work with institutions where they adopt some of the teaching methods that we have that started to work, or they ask some of our teachers to teach, or they could find different ways for us to work together. But I don't think we'll ever try to replace them or ever try to de-institutionalize what they're doing. If anything, it's just to create something very complementary. As you guys probably know, that's in this chat room and tuning in, like, education is such a huge problem. It's very, very, very complex. There's so many different moving pieces. There's so many different ways to solve it, and hopefully, we're one of hundreds of thousands of companies that are trying to achieve the same outcome.
James, did you have a question? Also, I know you work with kids too, and I'm also curious about how kids enter the picture too. So, but I'll let James jump in here.
All right. Hey, Mike. So I really wanted to ask you about your experience during South by. It seems like I don't know if this is 100% true, but it seems like if you start a child from early on, if you start teaching them to actually love to learn, that they seem to carry that through the rest of their life, as opposed to an adult trying to figure out, maybe I want to learn all over again. Maybe I can find love through here. So how did it feel when you were at South by seeing the kids actually engage with littleBits? And were their parents involved, or was it just other strangers and kids actually helping them? Like, what did you get from that?
Yeah, so to give context to everyone that's listening in, we hosted a workshop with GE with littleBits. littleBits is kind of like the 21st century version Legos. So they have like these electronic bits that connect, and kids could like make a bunch of cool things with those. Me and Malcolm, it was really interesting. So when we went to the first workshop, and near the end of that first workshop, a girl came up to us and asked us, how'd you guys make that? And I still point that experience at South by as one of the best. If I look back at the past year, that was probably one of the best experiences we ever had, because it really embodied everything we stand for and we want to create for Skillshare. So this girl came up to us, she asked us how we built this thing, and this thing that we built was a bell that rang. So essentially me and Malcolm put together all these crazy gadgets. If you press, this vibration motor, it channels all this energy. This thing vibrates inside of a bell, and the bell rings. It's really simple, but it took us a while to figure out how to do it. So we really quickly showed this girl how we did it. She put it together, made a lot of mistakes, and finally, after trial and error, she got the bell to ring. She called her parents over. Her dad, watched her, and she showed him how to do it. And then right next to her was another little boy with his parents, and she showed him how she did it. And then he went through the same trial and error, and then he ended up making it. And it was really cool to see, because it really embodied all those things we stand for, like learning by doing, learning by making things, learning by failing, learning from other people, learning from a teacher, learning from other students. It's just, within those 10 to 15 minutes, really embody all those things. And it really opened my eyes to start thinking about, like, how could we create a Skillshare for kids, specifically for something that allows them to learn with their parents. I think that's something we hopefully will do in the next couple of years. Obviously, we're very focused on what we're doing right now, but that's eventually something I would love to interact with and create. But going back to what you said earlier, I think one of the biggest problems with education today is, obviously we said, is that it's no longer about learning, which is not true for a lot of things. I think if you do broad strokes, broad statements, that is true. But if that statement is true, then the problem that stems out of it is that people stop learning when they graduate from school, because the pinnacle of education today is getting into college and getting a degree and maybe going to grad school. So when that happens, people believe that's the end of the road and they don't have to learn anymore. But if you really think about like how this planet has existed and how societies have evolved, it's always been around learning and learning from other people. And I think with things like Skillshare or Code Academy and all these other companies that are utilizing technology, hopefully it sparks that curiosity and that passion to continue learning, because we, like many other companies, believe that learning is a lifelong process.
Yes, Steve, did you have a question? I know, coming from the higher ed context, you might have a perspective on this.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I think that makes people feel comfortable about going into traditional higher education is the credentialing of the professors and the instructors, and knowing what their backgrounds are and what they can offer, and being able to gauge that through assessment and quizzes, tests, whatever it might be. With Skillshare, how do you vet out the good teachers? And I know that there's a system where people can give you recommendations or kind of speak to how good of a teacher you are, but as Skillshare grows and it expands, how do you really make sure that the teachers are teaching well and that the students are getting out of it what they expected when they signed up for it and paid for the class, things like that?
Yeah. There's a lot of things that we do. I think one thing that we do is we really focus a lot on trust and reputation. So you see that, eBay back, they still do it where you can leave a review for a seller. Airbnb does it very well because they make you verify your identity. And for us, we kind of do all those things as well. There's a lot of questions, so I'll just answer them one by one. So how do you know a teacher can teach? So all of our quality revolves around students learning what they were promised that they were going to learn. And if you can reduce the fear of teaching for a teacher that's never been trained properly, then that opens up a lot of opportunities. So for example, if you're learning design from the lead designer at Facebook, for example, or Cora, which is actually one of our Skillshare teachers, that person probably has a lot more knowledge than you would probably get from a traditional university. All we have to do is help them get over the bump of teaching. So there's a lot of things we do. So for one, it goes around our teaching model, which is very different. So he doesn't actually sit in front of the room and lectures. So that that teacher actually has a bunch of articles or videos or things already there on the internet that he passes on to the students before they get there. That teacher also focused on really passing off one concept and not trying to dive into like 14 different ones. 3, in that class, they're probably working on something together, or they're probably analyzing Facebook's design in real time. He might give them an assignment that they break out in smaller groups to do, and then he gives them feedback in class. My teacher might also give them assignments that they could do post-class that they interact with each other. But all that revolves around the teacher moving from an expert in front of a room, the facilitator that has a lot of experience that's really curating this learning experience for the students so that they learn the thing they're going to learn. So if that loop happens, usually what happens through Skillshare on the internet, we have a feedback system. So the students will give an endorsement to the teacher. Over time, the teacher, their reputation gains, and it becomes much easier for that person. So if they have 48 people that have endorsed them as a teacher that are former students, builds their trust and their reputation on the site. And also through that loop is all the students are giving the teacher in real time constructive feedback on how to become better teachers. So a lot of the teaching models we're seeing are not theories that we've come up with at Skillshare and we've tried to teach our teachers how to do, if that makes sense. These are straight from the students and how they want to learn. They give those to the teachers. The teachers will experiment and try it. Other teachers will see that, they'll copy it, and then next thing you know, we're like, wow, lecturing is almost non-existent on Skillshare, or it's starting to become less important. And that was very similar to what happened with Twitter, when they had the hashtag, the @ their users really adopted it and really made it their own. So a lot of to answer your question, that was a really long answer, for our quality control really revolves around a couple things. One is trust and reputation. 2 is for the students to actually learn what they were promised they were going to learn. And 3, it's to create a feedback loop system so that teachers become better over time. And then, and hopefully, as that happens at scale, people will learn.
Great, thank you.
Can I just ask a clarifying question, Michael?
Sure.
So what's the actual mechanism for teachers to learn from each other? Like, how do they have access to professional development?
So we're doing a lot on that. So I would say if Zappos was focused on customer service, we're very, very, very focused on education, obviously, but more specifically teaching people how to teach. So we do a lot of different things. One is in the cities that we're in, we're starting to host workshops for teachers so they could teach. So we share those best practices to them on how they're teaching. We're starting to roll out an updated teach page that has all the best practices, tips, articles. If you go to our website, so that's information that we start seeing that bubble up to us. We'll document that and then share that back out to the community. 3rd is when students go to classes, they see how they're done, so they hopefully will replicate that. And 4 is we're starting to do a lot of things online. So we're starting to host courses online, which is kind of what we're moving the model to hopefully in the next year. Teachers will hopefully be able to talk to other teachers that are doing very well and learn from them.
Cool. Maybe I'll let Lisa jump in. How does this all look from your perspective in the library and an educational institution?
Well, I think it's fantastic. And when he was talking about the peer-to-peer learning and the content creation and making and all of that, it really spoke to me for sure. I've seen it. In a library, part of our job is to provide resources for folks. And it doesn't matter whether it's a public library or a university library, but part of it is to provide the resources they need in order to help them learn and discover things. And so when he was talking about the littleBits, I had to smile because we do things like we've just purchased Arduinos for our students so that they can play and practice and try these things out, and soldering irons and things like that. And the idea of bringing kind of a makerspace to libraries is on the rise. I've seen it more and more, and people are really talking about it. And I loved when he was talking about the idea that this is complementary to maybe traditional models. But I did want to ask, actually, because I do work with a mixture of unconventional people and more traditional people that are educators, how do you convince those that are perhaps more traditional and or maybe this kind of model makes them a little bit nervous because it's something totally different? And how do how do you have that conversation? And what do I'm just curious what others think about that.
Yeah, I think there's two approaches I think you could tackle this if you have to try to you know wedge this in or convince the traditional educators if this is something you want to do. One is you know to be honest, I really haven't given that much thought to this because we're very focused on not doing anything traditional. But if I had to like go talk to my boss, I would kind of frame this as more of like an extracurricular thing. So you guys have your core things that we have to do. We have to test for these. These are math, science, you know, those type engineering, those type of things. And for extracurricular, let's try these new models and see how that works. And there's already been lots of documentation from all different camps and all different point of views and theories that this style works, and it works beautifully. So maybe starting small, improving it to them is a great way, and doing it something, documenting and having them see it and experience it would be a great thing. If this is something you want to kind of fit into a curriculum, I think you could look at something like the Khan Academy as a great example of something that works very, very beautifully. So a lot of those lectures are very, very, very simple to digest, and they're already online. It's very simple to watch videos, and having students interact and learn from each other is just massive, I think. So maybe rather than redoing and tinkering an entire curriculum, it's like maybe experimenting and trying that out for a day, a month, just to see how it works. And I think it's those little baby steps that will ladder up into massive change. So that's where I would start.
We have some questions starting to queue up on the live stream that I wanted to bring into the conversation. So we have a few folks sort of asking about the relationship between Skillshare and other types of open learning sites. So on one hand, things like Quora and Stack Exchange, and on other sites that are more about I don't know, e-learning or open educational content platforms like Udemy or lynda.com. Do you see Skillshare moving into those spaces or linking up with other platforms that are serving those different kinds of needs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think on the company level, we're very, very focused on our community. And what I mean by that, we're very focused on building products and services for our teachers and students, and we are a very, very small team. So a lot of people think we've been around for years. We've only been around for a year. We just hit our 1-year birthday last month. So Skillshare is very new. We're very young. There's a lot of things we're figuring out, and we don't partner with a lot of other companies because we're so focused on building our own things and moving at our own speed. As far as integrating with those other platforms, it's really up to the teacher. We're very, very bottom-up driven. So if a teacher wants to share a video from lynda.com or a YouTube video, or send his students to have Q&A on Stack Exchange, they're more than welcome to use any tool that they want out there. And we're more of the platform to get these students to learn with each other, whatever way the teacher wants that to happen. As long as they're doing it in this new way, that's more around doing than talking. So we're very open, and a lot of teachers have used videos and use all those other platforms. Some of our engineering teachers in New York will give out assignments for students on Code Academy, which is amazing because we don't have to do that either. But as far as on a company level, we're very, very focused on what we're building and letting companies like Code Academy really do what they do best, and allowing our teachers to use those tools when needed.
That's great. So you're relying on human level integration, not platform level integration.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's great. I also have a set of questions that are sort of about your demographic. Is Skillshare targeting a specific age group in regards to both teachers and learners? And what is there's a question about kind of the demographic breakdown in terms of sort of more privileged kinds of users. Does your community feels more on the elite side? Are you making efforts in terms of outreach beyond that sort of technically elite kind of crowd? Or what is your strategy as far as the broadening your demographic?
Yeah, we get that question asked a lot, and I would say like a great analogy or a great thing to think about is Facebook. When they first started, they started with Ivy League colleges. So when they first started, it might have seemed elite, but they picked one community and they built a great product for them. Once it started working, they started expanding as fast as they could. So today, Facebook, obviously IPO'd and probably the biggest social network, or it is the biggest social network on the internet. But they started small and they started adding to that, and we kind of took that same approach. And every single website and every single community that's been built online has taken that similar approach. So we didn't want to stray too far away from something that's been working on the internet for the past 10 to 20 years. So we started with communities that we thought would embrace it very well, and embrace in this new model that we were trying to create. So we started with the creative community. So think of the folks that are on Kickstarter, Behance, designers and illustrators and motion graphics, artists. We also started with the entrepreneurial community because that was just our background. So the entrepreneurs and investors. We also started with the food community because me and Malcolm and our team are huge foodies and we wanted to take classes on how to cook. And we also started with the arts and crafts community. So it's kind of like the community that's on Etsy. And when we first started a year ago, we felt like those are the communities that would probably adopt this, that were early adopters and really would experiment and try these new models. So where we go from today, yes, obviously, there's two things that will happen. One is we're going to move into a hybrid learning format, hopefully in the next year. I believe the future of education is an online and offline, balance. It can't be purely online. It can't be purely offline. The biggest opportunity is to blend those together. And the second is when that happens, one of the reasons we started Skillshare is from my experience when I lived in New Orleans. So post-Katrina, I volunteered for a year. My roommate at the time was a principal of a charter school, and their goal was to turn an 80% high school dropout rate to a 90% college graduation rate. And I just thought that was one of the most admirable, most remarkable things any human being can do on this planet. But for me, I felt like I could use my skill to build something on the internet for that kid in New Orleans to take a class in entrepreneurship for someone in New York if he wanted to. Or someone in New York, if he wanted to take a class on playing the trumpet from a kid in New Orleans, he should be able to do that as well. So that goes back to what I said earlier is, I don't feel like Skillshare is elitist. I think we do serve the communities we do. I think, if you really look at the prices, it's very, very affordable. Over the past year, our top student took 70 classes for a little over $2,200 on entrepreneurship, technology, and design, which is really remarkable and really game-changing if you really break that down. Hopefully in the future, what we could create is allowing anyone to take classes at that price at a high quality via Skillshare through a hybrid learning format. So that's the next phase of our company. We started small and hopefully we can start scaling this even bigger over the next year.
Luca, did you want to jump in on the conversation?
Sure. Just kind of talking on the back channel here. It makes a lot of sense, and the comparison to Facebook is, I think, a great comparison, starting with communities that you do, and then hoping that Skillshare diffuses like Facebook does. As a sociologist, and I'm not a business owner, so as a sociologist, I ask different questions, and something that I study and I see a lot in these open educations, it's starting with these cultural creatives and starting with the people that are in that so-called elite network. It kind of dictates the mode of both teaching and learning. So I fear and I kind of look for the trends of, okay, as you're expanding to communities that have less socioeconomic privilege or communities that are underrepresented in education, who Skillshare, is trying to revolutionize here. What happens when kind of those modes of education, the dispositions that are already privileged in the traditional education system that are being privileged in Skillshare system then are transferred onto those communities, and they're asked to, hey, keep up the way we're learning here, otherwise this isn't for you either. Do you guys kind of think of those questions, or am I just taking this to a different level that's not really interesting to the business model?
I think that's a really, really good question. I think that probably falls into the assumption that people that are unprivileged can't learn the same way, which I don't think is true. So I think that if you think about it from the context of the old model, it's like, yes, when I grew up, I was not good at standardized tests either. And I'm not good at quizzes. I'm not good at the topics that I wanted to learn in traditional settings. But I do believe that somebody in Detroit or New Orleans or they should be taking the same entrepreneurial classes that people in New York are taking from the same teacher, and being able to interact with other students and build those connections and break down those walls and those barriers. And I think one, a blended learning environment really allows that, and two, if that costs a student 10, 20, or $30, or if it's free, I think that's really, really remarkable. So I think as more people get on the internet, more information will be shared. The next phase of that is applying that information. I think this new model is not something that's for the elite or the privilege or whatever else we want to call it. It should be a new model of learning for everyone. It should be very tied to what you're curious about, what you're passionate about, and learning with other people that have this shared interest. And learning by failing, learning by making, and I think everyone should have access to that.
Yeah, and I think that's where, for me, it would be really exciting if we could see, more traditional institutions of education, even if it's at the margins of what they do, starting to embrace platforms like Skillshare, because again, it's sort of that initial exposure and outreach, and how are people finding about it? I mean, Luca, I know the work that you're doing with your team has been sort of looking at the experiences that people have to have before they're able to jump into these kinds of learning platforms. Like, people need to have priming experiences. They need to have this experience of, reaching out to strangers on the internet and things like that. And, this is where I think there could be some really fantastic partnerships between platforms like Skillshare, who are being really smart about the technology and the business side and the scaling and the community building around these core principles in a really technology empowered way, and institutions that are really, really good at reaching diverse communities and families and kids. And I think that's where, with connected learning, we're really trying to bridge some of the divides in terms of the institutional priorities and organizational priorities and skill sets across sectors of tech and education. And so I think this is the kind of conversation that I find incredibly important and potentially transformative. So yeah, I'm really I'm glad to see this crosstalk happening. I think, Stephen, did you want to jump in on the conversation? Looks like you had a question.
Yeah, you brought up a great point, and that entire line of conversation I think is important. I'm really intrigued right now as some of the more elite institutions have joined in, whether it be edX or Coursera, what their role in this entire change is going to be, and I'd love to pick Michael's brain about that, as far as MOOCs and open education being somewhat invaded by traditional higher education, and what that might look like affecting his business model, as well as Udacity, Udemy, any of the other ones as well, what it looks like with a traditional education kind of sneaking in and trying to take part of that as well.
Yeah, I would say, as far as Skillshare, I don't think it's going to affect us at all. I mean, I don't really, we always know what's happening out in the industry, but we're very focused on what we're building. As far as the Udacities and what MIT and Stanford's doing is, I think they're just innovating on top of a model that's already broken. So Clayton Christensen writes about that a lot. You can move it online. You could create hologram teachers that pop up. But if the system if the way people teach and the way they're learning is broken, it doesn't matter how shiny you make it. It's still the same thing. So I think moving lectures online is not going to be that effective. I think if you really look at the numbers, 160,000 people enrolled into Stanford, and less than 4 or 5% actually completed the course, which just shows you how hard it is for people to be really stay engaged online. As far as I guess how that affects us. On a positive note, I think it is great that they could take what they're teaching at Harvard or Stanford and giving it for free to everyone. I think they should have done that like 5 or 10 years ago, because that's what the internet is about. But I think it's awesome. Where it goes from there, I'm very curious to see, just like you, because there's only so many ways you could teach Econ 101. That's not going to be that different from the other 40,000 universities in the country.
Yeah, it will be really interesting to see how this rolls out in the next few years. Lisa, did you have a thread you
Um,
wanted to bring in?
yeah, actually. So again, as a librarian, part of our job is to provide these resources. And I was curious if Michael ever had a situation where a group needed resources that they couldn't obtain, and the idea that how do you overcome a potential lack of access to certain fields or content. For example, one of the things that we really wrestle with in higher ed, and particularly in libraries, academic libraries, is that the content, the peer-reviewed scholarly content that we have to purchase and make available in many times. There's a lot that's open, but not everything is, and many researchers need to publish in particular journals and so forth. And that access is granted to anyone who goes, who's part of the university community. But how do you, when you're in a model like this, have you ever had a situation where that was a barrier, and how do you overcome it? Just curious if it's, I don't know if it may be field specific, I suppose. Do you avoid that field for now until something's resolved, or like, how do you approach that? How do you think of it?
I've never personally experienced anything like that. I think it's because the classes I teach and classes I take aren't specific to those fields. But if I can answer that on a more broader level, I think that's what the internet was built to do. I think the power of the internet and the power of these networks and the network effects that come out of them is that it could completely dismantle an entire industry that's been very dictated from the top down. And what you're starting to see today is that starting to happen on the educational level with companies like Skillshare, and Udacity, and Codecademy. And you're starting to see resources and knowledge being shared openly through websites like Quora and Reddit. And I think over time, the idea of paying for a piece of paper or content online will be kind of odd, especially when a lot of that content can be widely available, whether it's through a teacher or you can ask a question to someone at Quora and they can start aggregating the information for you online. I don't think that will be a huge barrier anytime within the next couple of years. I think that will slowly start disintegrating and going away.
James, did you have a question too on this higher ed theme?
Yes, there was a article published. I think it was called "Hacking the Degree," and it was talking about how people in the future should be able to take classes from different schools, combine them together to form that one degree. How do you feel about that, and how would you test something like that? Like, how would you actually know that the people learned the material that was given to them? Like, how would jobs use that in the future?
That's a good question as well. That could open up a whole can of worms about college and traditional education, which I have very, very strong views for. I think anything anyone does to really dismantle where college and higher education is going is a good thing, meaning today colleges are run like corporations. They're very profit-driven. The tuition rates are going higher than they've ever been. The default rates on student loans are going higher than they've ever been. I think I read somewhere we just broke $1 trillion in college loan debt, which is outrageous. I can't give you the answer if that's going to work or not, but anything anyone can do to reduce that cost so it doesn't go up anymore is obviously a good thing. If if they could reduce going to college from 4 years to 2 years, 4 years to 3 years, 4 years to 1 year, allowing you to take classes from different schools. I have no idea what that is, but basically making colleges, whatever it can do to turn colleges into a free market versus like this monopoly that they have, I think is a great thing. Education should not cost $50,000 a year. That's just outrageous.
Very good, thank you.
Kind of a related question coming in from the live stream. Is Skillshare planning to incorporate or encourage the use of badges? Is this one of the ways that Skillshare would contribute to this whole credentialing question?
Yeah, eventually we will do something with credentialing. The reason we haven't done anything today is, like I said earlier, we're still new and there's just like the foundational stuff we're building. So if you're building a house, it's like you want to make sure your foundation is set before you start building like a cool TV room and like a bar and a playroom. So as we start building our house, we really want to get the foundation right. And the reason we haven't started anything credentialing, as you guys probably know in the education field, it's a very complex thing to try to figure out. How do you credentialize someone? Should everyone get it? Should you limit it? If it is limited, isn't that against our mission? But one thing we do like is the reason Harvard is such a great university is they have such a strong brand. And we've been talking to a lot of corporations because they also have a strong brand. So so we're not working with Apple by any means, but it's an example we use all the time. If Apple were to teach a product or industrial design course or create a school around industrial design, Jonathan Ives, the guy that designed the iPhone, was the dean, and all the designers there were the professors. And you took that course and you graduated, whatever that means. Would that be as valuable as something from MIT? And I would say it's probably even more valuable, because what we're starting to see today is people that apply to Skillshare are not even giving us a resume anymore. They're just showing us things they've built. We're looking at recommendations they've been given from other people they've worked with. We're starting to see like a new resume pop up where I couldn't even tell you where anyone in our company went to school, because it almost doesn't really matter. So where it goes as far as badges or credentializing, what happens in the future, it's still to be determined. And hopefully it's something we could roll out in the next couple of years, if not sooner.
Huh, that's interesting, but it sounds like you're seeing some sort of demand for it, in the sense that people are probably would like to find ways of getting their learning recognized or assessed.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
It's fair, and I think it comes out of the old model that people are very used to. They're used to taking a quiz and getting a grade. They're used to getting like an A or 3.8 GPA. They're graduating with some honors. And that should signal to an employer, to other people, that I'm awesome. Like, I'm awesome because I'm better than everyone because I'm really good at taking tests. And the reason we haven't rolled out badges yet, because I think badges and credentials are going to be probably on Skillshare might be different if we ever do badges, but it's more of like, can you show what you've done? Do you have proof? And I think that's kind of the model we're moving towards. Is you're not going to get like a huge golden star that you'll put on your resume. It'll be more of things you could actually prove, like look at this iPhone app I built when I worked at Apple and I took the iOS development course there, and Jonathan Ives or XYZ was my professor. I feel like that signals a lot more than like a stamp that a lot of people will get.
Right, so that it's not quite as extracted from that particular context or practice. Yeah, I think that's been the big controversy around some of the badging work, is the degree to which it's embedded within those specific communities and more of a community reputation oriented system, or something that is like that external assessment model in traditional education. And it's kind of interesting to see, with your community in particular, you're really trying to hold on to that sense of community ownership and bottom-up empowerment, and that, when is it at the same time you want people to be able to get their skills recognized in ways that further their accomplishments or visibility or learning in other contexts. So it's definitely an interesting tension. I think there's some questions, and maybe we're nearing, we're just in the last set of responses now, since we're getting close to the top of the hour. Just, I think people are curious to hear a bit more about your future plans in terms of growth and scale. Lisa, I didn't know if you wanted to jump in on that.
Sure. So when you were talking about learning can happen everywhere and this blend of online and physical learning, yeah, I thought perfect. Yeah, that makes sense. I've seen various models like that, and I think it seems successful to me. But I'm curious to know a little bit more about what the plan is or what your vision is for the physical aspect to grow further. I mean, will every city in town have a Skillshare group? And you know, part of what I've seen so far seems to be somewhat, at least it appears to be somewhat organically grown. And would that continue, or are you going to push for more outreach in new places more aggressively? And I am curious to know if there's any thought about working with libraries, only because they're physical, they're there. We are eager to help our communities learn, and it seems like it would be a great potential for partnerships.
Yeah, I would say, I guess to start is anyone could use Skillshare today. So if you wanted to create a class or a workshop or study group, you know, at your library now, you're more than welcome to use our platform to do that. So we don't limit the usage of Skillshare to specific groups or cities. It's just wide open to anyone that wants to use it today in the U.S. So, you know, if a traditional school to you know, local business to a local teacher, it's open for anyone. So we don't limit the use to anything. The only limitations we have is every class has to have more than 2 people, because we do believe in communities, and we're not a tutoring or one-on-one service. The second is we encourage all of our teachers to teach in this new model that we're trying to push out to our community. To answer your other question of where does this go from today, I think if you look at the past year, it was us making a lot of mistakes and learning a lot. Learning a lot from our users, learning a lot from our teachers and our students, and what worked, what didn't. A lot of that organic growth was in New York and San Francisco. I think are 2 really early adoptee type communities that really embraced it, and we're open to trying new things and open to the website breaking or things not working correctly. I think what you'll see from us over the next year is hopefully us growing and scaling Skillshare to other cities and communities. I mean, our mission is to make it accessible to everyone and make it affordable and allow people to learn the skills they want and share the knowledge that they have. And in order to do that, hopefully we could take advantage of the internet and really, grow our community and user base such that in a year we could throw a dart at a map and hopefully find a Skillshare happening somewhere in that proximity. So over the next year, we're going to be very, very focused on growing Skillshare in other cities, testing out new teaching models, testing out new learning models, experimenting a lot, and hopefully having some things work very, very well, and doing those over and over again. So what does that translate to more granularly, more specifically? You'll see us expanding to new physical locations, new cities, new skill sets. So we'll probably branch out of this communities we're in and maybe move into others. You'll see us moving into blended learning. We're currently working on allowing any organization to create a school. I would say that's probably going to be our focus over the next year. And if we hit that even sooner, we'll probably reassess and see where we should go next.
That's great. Since we're nearing the end of our time together, I wanted to invite every one of the Hangout participants if you had any last comments to close the session, and we'll end with Michael. I don't know who wants to jump in first.
I guess I'll jump in first. I just wanted to say thank you. It was pretty good, and I love what you guys are doing. I can't wait to see more.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll say the same. Thanks, Michael. I mean, you guys have an excellent business model, and it's great to see such a model being applied to education, to see where innovation can kind of take off and not get mired down by bureaucracy. So great job.
Yeah, I agree. I'll say the same. Thank you so much. This was fantastic, and I'll say that for libraries, I know we're talking about a lot of the same things. really curious to see how it'll grow in the future. And yeah, keep us in mind for partnerships, because I know a lot of librarians are interested in this kind of learning and these sort of unconventional models, and could provide a whole new community to you as far as that goes. But thank you so much.
Thank you as well for taking some time to chat with us and answer questions, and also to Connected Learning for putting it together. As somebody who works with student development outside of the classroom, I really appreciate putting skills to use and seeing what kind of outcomes come from that, and that's being what's graded on and what really matters to student learning. So I appreciate that, and thank you for your time.
Cool. Well, awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you, Connected Learning, for putting this together as well. Really enjoyed the conversation today. If there's anything I would end on, I would say that I think today in our society and just in general in the world, I think the most abundant resource are excess knowledge and skills. It just needs to be shared with other people, and hopefully we could use platforms like Skillshare to really facilitate that, and hopefully in the long run reignite learning back with education. And I hope that we're one of many other companies that do that. If that happens, I think we'll slowly start to solve the education problem in our country.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael, and everybody on the Hangout for a really lively and also inspiring session. Please continue to join us on our weekly webinars and to continue conversations like this. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you.